Still having breakfast with BLSA CEO Busisiwe Mavuso, and thank you so much for staying with us, Busi. I want to touch on a topic that you recently wrote an article on. But before I do that, I mean, Khanki Matabane recently also equally wrote an article on it, and I want to get just an extract of that, and I quote, he says here, that, talking about a small business owner, rather, who has unfortunately lost her business, that some people haven't been paid. Letabo owes hundreds of thousands of rands to the bank, suppliers, family and friends. She may lose her car and house, but on paper, the business is viable. Actually, it's making a tidy profit, except for one thing. She cannot collect from her debtors who owe ABC Construction more than 20 million rand. It seems to be the headache of most small businesses that they can't collect from their creditors, yet they have this responsibility to pay workers, etc., and almost facing the inevitability of having to shut down.
Absolutely. Actually, according to a survey recently conducted, it shows that 47% of small businesses highlight the issue of cash flow and late payments as the biggest risk, to their continued operations. So that is how serious the problem is. And I think take that and compound it with the COVID-19 crisis that we've just experienced as a country, it just really makes the problem worse. Actually, 60% of the businesses that are actually surveyed during this time are saying that we don't know if we'll be able to reopen our doors. And think about what that does to the unemployment in this country. It's therefore no wonder that according to the stats that were released, by the Stats General, I think about a week ago or something like that, the unemployment has gone up by 30.8%. The Q2 unemployment numbers are sitting at 2.2 million people that have lost their jobs. The Q2 GDP numbers are talking about a 51% annualized negative economic growth. And that is what the impact of paying SMMEs on time is. So if we're serious about dealing with the jobs crisis that we have in this country, let's agree that our chance as an economy, as a country, is how deliberate and intentional we are going to be as business, as government, by paying SMMEs on time. You give an SMME a 5 million rands contract, they are not going to be able to deliver on that contract, most likely, with their own, current resources.
Right.
They really have to go out there and hire a pair of hands or two. That is how employment gets, created. So if we are serious about turning the economic trajectory of this country around, if we are serious about dealing with the poverty levels, which are currently sitting at 50%. If we're serious about the unemployment stats, that is currently sitting at 31% in terms of the narrow definition, 40% in terms of the expanded definition, where you have more people that are unemployed than those that are employed in all the provinces except Gauteng and the Western Cape, then I would argue, that the payment of SMMEs on time is really one of those interventions that are actually going to be a game changer for us as a country. SMMEs normally would tell you that they normally get their payments in about 120 days. So you can imagine if big business and government were to commit on paying SMMEs in 30 days, how much of a game changer that is going to be, what it's going to mean to the employment situation, what it's going to mean to the disposable income that we have in this country, what it's going to mean to the consumer spending that we need to get the economic activity going. So I don't know if we realize, the dependency or the impact, rather, of not paying SMMEs in time and what that means or the ripple effect it has, on the broader economy, from an economic activity perspective, from a jobs perspective, So I guess we're really going to have to be more thoughtful about how we deal with this.
And sorry, to remind government as well that they are complicit here, aren't they, in their lack of paying on time. Let's talk about jobs and unemployment and the sort of policies that we have in place at the moment. I mean, Trevor Manuel said, that black economic empowerment should be dealt with in a different way. It's important in this country, but we found that the way it's operating now has very little to do with transformation. A lot of corruption linked to it. So how do we take this important policy and how do we make it a better document for South Africa today?
Jane, there is no doubt that South Africa needs BBBE.
Yeah.
Is it working in its current form and shape? You know, maybe not. It's not a perfect policy, and I think we need to look at how we can actually ensure that it really addresses the broad-based, you know, interventions that I think we had actually had in mind when we ushered it in. Unless and until we can come in with ways of how we make it better, unless and until we can come up with ways of, if we take Triple B away, what replaces it? Then I think the conversation is really going to be a non-starter, you know, because we need this interventionist policy precisely, you know, to deal with the triple challenges that we have in this country. A lot of us would not, myself included, by the way, I'm an affirmative action candidate. So had it not been for these policies, you know, you wouldn't have seen a lot of black professionals rise to certain levels. You know, we wouldn't have seen a lot of black, you know, suppliers, a lot of black owners, a lot of black shareholders, and. But I guess, you know, there is a lot that needs to be done. I think just take the enterprise and supply development aspect of Triple B, for instance. It is very frustrating to me how we, as big business, seem to use enterprise and supply development for perpetual training without graduation for these SMMEs. Because a lot of them will tell you that, you know, I kept on being sent to these training and skills development and whatever, you know, but I never get a contract. So I get trained and I put into the database, but I never see a contract. So the biggest frustration for SMMEs today is not really access to capital, but it is access to markets. And the markets that they're actually struggling to access is the private sector. So I guess to your point, Trevor Manuel is right to say that in its current form or shape, Triple B is actually not working, and we need to look at, you know, how do we actually make it better. Maybe we should remove enterprise and supply development. Why don't we just bring in preferential procurement? You know, because we know that with procurement, then you have no choice as a business but to actually buy something from the supplier, which is what is therefore going to get the economic activity going, rather than training them, you know, on endlessly, you know, without giving them an opportunity to supply you.
All right, Busi, well, we have to leave our conversation there, but thank you so much for joining us and having breakfast with us and, you know, just highlighting some of the most important issues that we're facing in business today.